We'll use the microphone for the official beginning. Yeah, so I encourage you to move up. We're going to do a neat art experiential piece here to begin the presentation. Before we start, let me introduce myself. For those who don't know me, my name is Mark Wiegensberg. I'm the director of the Institute for Integrative Health, and it's great this is our first breakfast symposium of the current, medical year since July 1st. So welcome everyone, bright and early as usual, but that's why we have the coffee and the bagels, and so I hope you enjoy that, and also a little bit of the camaraderie and networking to begin with. For a moment. So before we begin, I just wanted the slide up here. If there are any IIH researchers out there, I'm not sure if there are, but even if not, let you know there's going to be a big international congress on integrative medicine and health in Las Vegas in May. And if you know any IIH researchers or anybody doing research here at USC in integrative medicine or related fields, there's a fast approaching abstract deadline to submit abstracts for that conference. So just wanted to make sure I announced that. And IIH will be sponsoring some, if you get an abstract submitted and accepted. We're working out the details, but we will be doing some partial scholarships, particularly for students who are working with faculty. So you can let us know. The other thing I just wanted to give a heads up about is next April. The date is still to be decided, but we'll be, the IIH will actually be sponsoring an interdisciplinary integrative health conference. It'll be here on the HSC campus, and this will be, it consists of a keynote speaker and multiple breakout workshops on various topics in integrative health. This is sponsored by the Weil Foundation. We got a grant from them, and several different departments and schools, social work, medicine, Department of Physical Therapy, that are very actively right now planning that conference. So that'll be, when we get the exact date and program and that'll be up on our website probably within the next several weeks. So just to give a heads up for that. Okay, so I wanted to introduce our speaker this morning. We're really, really happy and pleased to have Debra, who's here from Loyola, Marymount University. And Debra is the chair and program director of the graduate program of Marital and Family Therapy at Loyola Marymount. And she's going to speak to us today on a very exciting topic that here at USC, and particularly in this building and surroundings, the IGM art that we have on here. Debra's going to speak to us about really kind of the history and as she sees it of art therapy. I'll let you announce the exact title, but how art and healing kind of go together. And Debra's going to give us her perspectives on that. Thank you, Debra.
Thank you, Mark. No pressure. No pressure. Okay. How do I get out of this to the desktop?
That's exactly what I was afraid of. Do you know? Oh, here, exit show, probably.
All of us that are over 30 have,
None of us are over.
Just close them all.
That was very generous.
30 was generous?
Yeah, that was very generous.
Can you read that? It's really blurry. Yeah, okay, so the top, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. We're going to start with an experiential, but before I do that, I'd just like to introduce myself to you and my topic so that the experiential has some context. So the topic of my talk is imagery and psychotherapy, and contemplating art therapy, and then I have in brackets theory, because honestly I don't even know if there is a theory of art therapy. There are plenty of people that think there is, or there are theories of art therapy, and there's great conflict in the field. So I'm going to take the position of questioning whether there is theory, and that's kind of the conversation I want to have with you. this is my personal reflections on the theme. So, as Mark said, I'm at Loyola Marymount University, and there's my email address. If any of you would like to connect with me, I'd be very welcoming to that. And at the top of the screen, I actually have my career laid out for you, which is the 5 books that I've authored. And I have that not to brag, although I'm proud, but to show you my own trajectory and what I think about. So on the my right, your left, my first book was very clinical, working with adolescents. In particular, I'm interested in adolescents because it's very hard to do psychotherapy with them. And when you have an experientially based, image-based kind of process, it's more possible to engage them. Because if you think about the developmental stage of adolescence, they are creating themselves. And if you give them a creative process with which to engage in psychotherapy, you have I was going to say you have a foot in, but I don't think you have a foot in, I think you have a door open, right? So that was a long time ago. And then I became more interested in working with families, still staying in a very clinical mind. Then I became interested in taking the artwork to the families themselves and working more in the community. So that's working with families outside of clinical context in the middle. Then I became, and that's really hard to see, a book I wrote called Panim El Panim, which is about my midlife return to a spiritual investigation in looking at religious text. Panim El Panim is Hebrew for face to face, and it comes from Genesis, and I was looking at my own experiences with Genesis. And my last book, which is Midrashic Mirrors, which is my full 2 feet right into my spiritual practice, which is looking at studying scripture or Hebrew text and making art about it. Now, I show you all of that because the trajectory for me, from a very clinical mind to a much more holistic mind that includes spirituality, is something that I think the field has to do, and we all have to do as practitioners. So that's who I am. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Graduate Department of Marital and Family Therapy, and I have brochures here if anybody's interested later. These are the brochures about our department. We are a program that leads to licensure as an MFT clinician in the state of California, but the emphasis is entirely on using your art background to engage in the clinical encounter. The clients are making art, and art is the entire focus or modality of the intervention. Our students come into the program with a significant background as artists. Okay. I also wanted to tell you we have, our department has its own journal. It's called the Journal of Clinical Art Therapy. I'm proud that we're about up to our 3rd issue. We also have a gallery where we exhibit the art of our students and our alumni. And we have a program in Mexico because we take our students to Mexico every summer. That's my familiarity with Michoacan. And because we're really a great believer in the sort of intercultural context, especially if we're focusing on imagery. It takes us, it turns us into anthropologists in a way, you know, because we're looking at the art as artifact, and it's artifact of the psyche as well as artifact of the culture. Okay, so that's me, and let's move to our experiential exercise. Can I not use this for the experiential exercise? Okay. We're going to start with color, and I want each of you, I should say all these things. I always say that I know none of you are artists, or maybe some of you think you are. Doesn't matter. This is all just an exercise.
Can I help you?
No, I'm good. We're just, so what I want you to do is just pick one of these papers that's on your table. Maybe you can pass them around across your table. Just pick a color. Why don't you come out and do this too? Okay, so spread those out and pick a color. And don't think too much about it, just pick a color. That's one of our elements, right? When we're, as an artist, or we're making art, color is an element. So anybody have a thought about the color they picked? Anybody want to talk about the color they picked?
I picked black.
You picked black, okay.
I'm surprised I picked.
You surprised you picked black, so there's already a curiosity about that. Nice. Anyone else want color? Yeah, here's our colors.
I picked this gorgeous fuchsia.
Gorgeous.
And I was a little surprised I picked it because this is the color I'm really drawn to always. But I wanted this one.
Okay, so, you know,
I've always done it that way.
so what about that notion of picking a color you're not drawn to? I mean, there's already something happening. Anyone else about the color? Yeah.
I think the same gorgeous color, but I think from an artist's perspective, because it was the first color that was the moment of emotions.
Okay, great. So there's already so much about why you chose what you chose, what it provoked in you, what you're thinking about, what it made you curious about. Okay, so now I want you to pick onto that paper one of these images. Now, I thought there were going to be 50 people here, so I got a lot of images. I feel like I'm serving you. Of old behaviors as a waitress here are getting about. Just want you to pick one image. Could you share them in little clusters? And you got about a minute to pick an image. I'm going to bring another one to the back table. Anything? Come and sit up here. Okay. So
Can
what
I pick more than one?
No, I want you to pick one.
Oh.
Just pick one and then pick an image. Okay, so listen, let's think about the things that are being said and what's happening. Someone's asking to pick more than one. So there, you know, in this experiential process, all kinds of things, but do you want to test limits? Do you want to break limits? What if I say no, just pick one and one of you pick 5 anyway, you know? There's already processes that are going to start to illuminate your relationship to this process, to this room, to me. You know, you might say, oh, I don't want her authority, I'm going to pick 5. That's already developing some dynamic for exploration. You pick 5, right? Okay, so everybody's got your image? So now what I want you to do is to glue, you see glue sticks around, I want you to find a place on that piece of colored paper where you want to glue that image down.
So Dolly used to work.
Yeah? So as you're doing this, what might come up about the image? Anybody have a response to the image they picked or the process of selecting your image? Yeah.
I picked the shell that shows a spiral, like the chambered nautilus from the poem that shows that every year your body cannot outgrow the confines of the shell, and that each year the spiral takes you to a higher life level.
Beautiful.
And that is the key to life.
Beautiful. So you already have a whole philosophical treatise from your image. Fantastic. Anyone else? Yeah.
I don't know, it looked like an eye, and it reminds me of the vision looking toward the future.
Beautiful. Great.
It's a string of pearls, but I didn't know that that's what it was when I picked it. It looked like a bunch of eyes, and I really didn't know what it was, but I was just kind of intrigued by it.
Great.
And then I figured out what it was.
Okay, great. Love it. Okay, I'm going to go to the second step. Now we're going to do, I want you to pick a little phrase or a word and add it to your image. I want you to stay, but thank you, Pete. As the words come along, so you can see what we're doing here. We've got color, the first thing you chose, the second thing was an image, and now we're going to language. And those are really the 3 dimensions of what we do in our work. Color, imagery, and then language. So you guys are here, you know what? You guys should.
Do we should glue the words to it?
One word, one phrase, and glue it on. One phrase, one segment of language. Sometimes they're one word, sometimes they're a phrase. Now I also want to point out that as I'm walking around, we don't have the privilege of this. There's some groups that are looking at all the words before they make a selection. There are other groups that are sort of randomly picking a word. All of these processes become available for us as an interaction to notice what's like. So the engagement in the experience is as meaningful as the product that is created, right? Okay, so you all now have, you know what, I have a lot to show you, so I'm going to ask you to kind of bring this to some closure. And then hold on to this piece and think about it as it relates to the stuff I'm showing. Okay? You all just made a piece of art. You used color, you used an image that had some sort of connection in terms of your selection of it, and you used language to embellish it. Look at your piece. Yes,
As it relates to,
what I'm going to show you.
oh, okay.
So I'm going to show you some theoretical approaches to thinking about art, and I want you to use your experience as kind of the lab in which you're thinking about what I'm showing you. Okay, and then if we have time, and I don't know, we've got a lot on the agenda here, I'd love to hear what you made, which you may or may not want to talk about. Okay? So we used color, we used imagery, we used word, and we thought about meaning, maybe you didn't, and I'd like you to consider your work as I move through the theoretical ideas in this presentation. So contemplating art therapy. I'm sure you're in agreement with me that no theory is an absolute truth, but is a historical and social construction based in a particular location and a moment in history. What theory does is provides a basis for understanding the relationship of art to therapy and understanding how to use art within therapy. I want to talk a little bit about the history of art therapy, as Mark alluded to. Its earliest foundations were, of course, psychoanalytic, actually completely Freudian. The notion of the unconscious is really big in our work, right? And the idea that the art is a mirror or a reflection of the unconscious process. It's very much rooted in psychoanalytic understanding. And of course, the roots of art therapy come back from about the 40s and the 50s when psychoanalytic thinking, psychodynamic thinking really dominated the delivery of mental health services. In more recent years, that changed to a more humanistic understanding. The 60s and Gestalt therapy and group therapy, those kinds of things, really softened, if you will, or humanized kind of the more psychodynamic frame. Family systems, of course, the thinking of family systems and the early family therapists broadened that as well and changed the kind of theoretical kiln, if you will, that the art therapy theory was growing up in. And then, of course, the dominance of multicultural thinking, which again added into a more inclusive voice. The origins of the field, as the origins of many fields, were really dominated by one voice or one culture. In our field, that was actually white women. And the inclusion of other voices to inform the theory became an agent of change in the development of our theories. The focus on trauma. Everyone now talks about trauma, right? And the importance of understanding trauma in clinical work also shaped and reformed some of the thinking about art therapy. Understandings, new understandings, cutting edge understandings about neurobiology as well, really, and that's really interesting. I'm going to show you some slides about the kind of art that you can see when a kid is, or an adult is kind of perseverating in a way that is linking into neurobiological processes. And resiliency, that's the key word right now in mental health, resiliency. It's not a word I love. I have some concerns about it, but it is the dominant word, and I want to show you the ways in which that has also informed thinking about imagery. So that's a big, ambitious you're welcome. That's a big, ambitious project. We're going to start with the psychoanalytic theory, because that's where we start. The theory then is that art allows for the representation of the unconscious or the latent material, and the processes are relief, catharsis, sublimation, you know, all those defense mechanisms, repression, suppression, you know, right? Okay, so I'm going to show you a case. Can you see this? Can you see that there's a little surfer down here? The sun is really not doing much for the projection of imagery here today. I don't know what to do about that, because I have a great view on this little monitor. So this was a 12-year-old boy who had recently relocated to California from Florida, and I was seeing him he had been sent from by his mother to his maternal aunt because she couldn't handle him. And he had had a series of displacements in his earliest years. And when he came into my office, he didn't want to do the art very much, but he told me that, I asked him what he liked about California, and he said he liked the ocean. So he made this picture, and it's a really large piece of paper with a very tiny self-representation. And although it's hard for you to see it, he's about to get wiped out in that wave. So I asked him to tell me more about the ocean, and he started to tell me about a boat. And he made this boat, and then he took that red, you kind of imagine a boat with all that red scribble not on it, and then he took the red marker and started scribbling really aggressively and said, and you know, like little boys do, making all those great noises, like, you know, and there was this real explosive battle going on, and he said, this ship is getting bombed and it's getting blown up. But he told me that, let me see if I can you see the cursor? That little helicopter there? He said, but the captain of the ship got off on a helicopter. I said, oh, what happened to the captain of the ship? And I glued more paper to the side. So I thought it was you, maybe Toby, who were interested in narrative therapy. This is just extending the narrative, right? So in the next picture, and you can see the glue. You see where I glued it down there? And you can see the trajectory then of the helicopter. And there's the helicopter landing. The ship, he said the helicopter got away. The captain got away on the helicopter and got to this ship, which is David. And what do you notice about this ship? It's armed. It's a warship as opposed to the first ship, right? And it's got a gun. It's also called David, his stepfather, which was one of the reasons he got sent away from Florida because of his mother's newest marriage. His name was David. Right. So there's these little clues sometimes that become helpful keys to unlocking the potential meaning of the story. And he said, but you know what? He said to me, this ship was attacked too. You can't see the fire, but you can see the smoke coming out of the smokestack, he said. So there's an internal fire in this, internal destruction. And he said, but the captain got away from this ship too. So what are we going to ask him to do? Next piece of paper, where's he going? And he made this ship. What's the difference with this ship? It's a submarine. So it has the capacity. Just think about these things in terms of it goes it submerges. I think submerge is a psychological word, right? So that's the end of this case. I could talk about this case for the rest of the day, but I want to show you the psychoanalytic thinking that I would have been embedded in when I was doing this clinical work, and that I can still see as very useful to our understanding. We can see the building of the defense mechanisms as he became vulnerable, built some defense mechanisms, and then some perhaps not too adaptive defense mechanisms. The submarine perhaps is not the most adaptive, and we have a treatment intervention. Okay, and then I've just got an example of those three pictures. You can see how they were created. Okay, we're going to move to the next. I'm going to take you through this pretty quickly. I hope that's useful to you. In humanistically informed art therapy, then imagery becomes an expression of the universal and expression of the self. The art therapy process is to create connection and relationship and reach an authentic self. So you hear how different the language is? I think you can tell what my conclusion is already going to be, which is all of these things are relevant, right? So hold those. Oh, and to go back to your own piece, because that's important, just think for yourself, what were the potential psychodynamic interpretations of your piece? Do you see some of your unconscious in there? I don't want to know. But do you see some of your own ships and fires and helicopters and your own story? Okay. I won't belabor that. So let's see a little case here. Oh, it's really hard to see that. I can't tell what you can see. This isn't a collage picture, not unlike the pictures you got of a cat. Can you see the cat? Yeah? Okay. So this is a girl, she was 11. She really didn't want to do art therapy at all. She was, I started at the juvenile school. It's a school for emotionally disturbed children. And she had been passed to every therapist there. No one wanted to work with her. She didn't want to work with any of them. And she comes in here as one of these kids with the hair completely in her face, just no access to her at all. And she said, well, she'd pick one collage picture. And then could she go? Every time she did something, she'd say to me, can I go now? Can I go now? Can I go now? So it's really fighting the sort of development of a relationship. She picked this picture, and I said, well, just use some markers, and the way I asked you to put some words to your picture, I asked her to draw an environment to the picture, and what you can see is she drew the house, right? Can you see the house? The house, it has a path and a tree beside it. And it says, you probably can't read it, it says along the top there, do you see there's some words? Can you see that? Can everybody see what it says?
Cat in the house.
Okay, so I want you to remember that, the cat in the house, okay? Remember that. She came in the next week and said, do I have to be here? I don't want to be here. I said, well, and I love this because there's a ritual. And part of her ritual is to fight me, and part of my ritual is to be okay with it and to invite her into increasing art making. And we developed a choreographed script. My favorite trainer of psychotherapy is Fred Rogers. Do you remember who Fred Rogers is? Fred Rogers, he'd come and start the show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Some of you are too young to remember it. He'd come and start the show. He'd take off his suit jacket. He'd unlace his shoes. He'd put his cardigan on. He'd put his slippers on. You were 10 minutes into the show, right? And then there was the show. And the last 10 minutes of the show is he takes off his slippers. He takes off his cardigan. He puts his jacket on. He puts his shoes on. And it was a beautiful instruction to psychotherapy, the sort of container of ritual. So that we had the same thing going on with this girl. Look at the second picture she picks. What is it?
Dog.
It's a dog. What else about the dog?
In the house.
He's in the house. The cat was in the house. He's looking really in a state of relaxation. That cat, although I think it was hard for you to see it, was very wary. It's like a watch cat. This is actually a sleeping dog. His eyes are closed. Now, I'm not going to suggest to you that that means that she was more relaxed with me, but I think it means that she was more relaxed with me, because where we're going to go in this, and she also made doors and windows in the house.
And the house is bigger.
The house is bigger, yeah.
2 trees
And
and
a sun, there's a sun.
Okay, guys, you got it. There's a lot of clues in the picture that help you form your understanding.
It's his house.
And, okay, that's really good. So there's 2 changes in the language. Not only is it his house, so it's got a personal pronoun. Is that the language? Is that the correct grammar? It's got a personal pronoun, but there's a verb in it. Remember it said the cat in the house? This is the dog is in his house. That verb is almost like an existential marker, or a marker of an existential existence in this relationship. Okay, here's the next one. She calls it my house. She started coming in and saying, can I have a collage picture today? So it stopped being, do I have to come? The script was changing. This is really interesting because the first thing that she did with this picture was these bricks. You see, the bricks are actually in the collage picture, but she continued the patterning of the bricks, I think suggesting to me that she had some anxiety stimulated by this picture. This picture actually looks like her family. She's an African-American child. And she called this my house. So we went from the house, to his house, to my house. Do you see the development? All, I believe, because of the sort of humanism of our relationship. Yes?
She said, can I, blah, blah, blah. So at first it seemed like it was an obligation. She didn't want to be there. And then she wants to be there. She likes
Yeah.
it.
Well, likes it might be a stretch.
Yeah. Well, she feels much more at home.
She feels at home. We have, I believe, created a safe place in which she's naming some. So interesting, there's no door here. So you can look at all these subtle things. The trees are different. This was a home we learned, you'll see in a minute, where there had been very severe abuse. The next one, and the reason that can you see there's a piece of tape? Because I've just covered up her name because for ethical, confidential reasons. On ethics, right? It says her name on it. What's going on in the house now? We went from a cat to a dog to some children in a window to actually a relationship. That's
It's a little girl with a woman.
It's a woman, yeah. It's actually, if there's some clues in it, I just put a stethoscope on on her as well. So it's a provider of services. So I think we're seeing quite a big change. Sorry? Oh, okay. Okay, that's the last one for Diana. So what you saw in that, in terms of a less psychodynamic orientation, was more one of establishing a relationship and creating a safe place for the authentic actualization of self. The third impact on this, on our theory is family systems. And art therapy theory then is that the imagery represents a social reality, the roles and the power relationships in the system, and that the art therapy process itself can facilitate structural changes that can lead to improved functioning. So I'm going to show you a little example of this. And you may remember this work, Pink. This was work I did at the Museum of Tolerance. This was with a group of adolescents who were identified as severely at risk for gang affiliation, and we brought them to the Museum of Tolerance and had them create representations of self, which are those plates, and come to the table with those representations of self to try and create a different structural change among their group. You can see what we did as they brought, can you see these? Yeah? Okay. As they brought their pictures to the table, we mosaicked the table to actually change the context for the relationships between the kids. There they are. They made real, what's the word I'm looking for? Life-size, thank you. They made life-size puppets of themselves and decorated chairs that they brought to the table. And there you can see this kid is trying to arrange the feet of his representational puppet. So the idea of systemic change, who are you, how do you come to the system, and how can you change the system to give you access to it? Here's the, at the end, can you see those pictures?
Yes.
Yeah. This was really interesting. This was a long time ago that we did this work, but actually Schwarzenegger was running for governor at the time, and he came and did a press conference at the Museum of Tolerance while this was installed, and used this as one of his conversations about working with inner city youth. I remember, this is a real sidebar, but I remember really feeling appropriated by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who probably really honestly had no, sorry about my politics here, but probably had no interest in this work whatsoever. The next theory that's informing my history, my arc of history over art therapy theory is multiculturalism, where art is informed as much by the cultural context as it is by the individual and family dynamics. In that, in the making of the art in art therapy, the cultural understandings can be broadened. And this is some work I did out in the Simi Valley in a parish out there with families who were without documentation. And we worked on the fears the family had. They were, the parents didn't have any documentation. The adolescent children in the family were born in the US. And the families were very frightened about the kids' adolescent behavior, because if they got caught with marijuana or whatever, the whole family's status in the United States could be very vulnerable. That was the essence of this work. And this is a picture by made by one of the mothers, talking about her on your left, on the left side, her work when she was in Mexico, when she worked in an office, and her work where she's in the US, where she works undocumented in a clothes factory. It was really helpful that they made these images, because they were able to share them within the family, and the kids could have a really poignant way to see what the kind of loss in the experience of their parents was. This is another one. This was made by one of the adolescents, and she made it. You can see it's a jigsaw puzzle. So she first made the drawing, and then she cut it up to be a jigsaw puzzle. So she talked about what it meant to be biracial, and what it meant to be the American Mexican daughter of undocumented Mexican parents, and what a puzzle that was. And every day she was putting the pieces of puzzles. So when you bring the families together to show their artwork, you can really see the impact of the story from the teenager to the mother, and the mother to the teenager. What was really cool too is we got the fathers really involved. Typically, it's hard to get these fathers involved. in the therapy, culturally and schedule, all of that. But because it was a very physical process and we brought nails and wood and clay for them, they were able to really engage in this. Okay.
Did you tell them to make it a puzzle?
No.
They-
Yes.
She just made it.
Correct, exactly. Right. So the next thing I want to talk about is the trauma focus, because talking about trauma is really current in the mental health world, and it too informs what we do and how we think about what our therapy theory is. The theory is that art facilitates the trauma narrative. Everyone's talking about trauma narratives right now, right? And that trauma can be processed in the construction of a narrative. So for trauma, I'm going to go back to one of our grand traumas as a culture, which is the terrorist attack in 2001. And I'm going to show you some artwork that I gathered actually the day after the terrorist attack in a elementary school. It's very near LMU, and that's important to put into this because our campus is very near the airport. So I don't know if you remember, but there was some concern that some of those planes were coming to LAX, so there was some concern around the security around the airport. These kids go to a Catholic school, and I say that because they were told at school, the teachers were told not to talk about what had happened, and the parents were counseled not to talk about what had happened with the kids. So the kids were getting imagery coming into them from the televisions and other places. You remember this day, right? You remember this day in your own lives. The terrorist attacks were Tuesday. This was Wednesday when I collected these drawings. So I'm going to show you. Oh, they're so hard to see.
See that one? Wow.
Okay,
There we go.
go. There's the first one. Okay, I want you to hold in your head, oh, and you know what I haven't been doing? With each theory, my elegant presentation had been, with each theory I wanted you to look at your own card and see how it might be connecting to the theory. Okay, you got that, I don't have to, okay. Remember that these were made by kids who were told that kids in classrooms where the teachers were told, don't talk about what happened, right? What's in your mind, we said to the kids. That was the directive for these drawings.
Wow.
You can see these.
What's the first one? Can you describe what's happening in the first one?
Yeah, there are two towers, and there's some smoky like fire on the outside of them, and there's something in the middle. It's either that's probably a kindergarten or first grade because you're seeing some developmental. These are across the developmental spectrum from kindergarten through 8th grade. We went into all the classrooms. I took my students and we went into all the classrooms. You know what it's doing for me? I don't know if it's doing this for you, but it's taking me right back to that day.
You must have seen this, right, on television?
Yes, yes, because the images are very evocative of the images we saw on television. Yeah.
They're coming.
So actually what we did with this, and I know many of you are interested in research, and I'm not going to talk about it, is we had about 500 or 600 drawings. We looked at some of the markers that have been suggested in the literature. What are markers for trauma? Two of the markers for trauma are reduced use of color and no ground line. So the images actually go to the bottom of the paper, right? So those are two of the markers. They're not substantially proven. Those are some of the, there's not much proven in our field. There's these hunches. Those are two of the markers that are hunches. And actually, although I only looked at 600 drawings, and you can see already the decrease in color. There tends to be, they're much more monochromatic, and there's a lot of these pictures that don't have a ground line. So just from my little research that I did, it was actually one of the master's research projects of one of my students, we could see that those two markers, there was some support in evidence that those two markers were in fact suggestive of the trauma. Yeah?
Just jump to the ground, you're talking about.
I'm talking about no ground line, like in this picture,
I see.
in this picture, I can't reach, that picture there is a ground line. Yeah, okay? Okay, so that's trauma. let's talk a little bit about, I'm sorry if I'm going over, okay. The neurobiology is that the art engages the limbic systems and that the art making actually changes the activity in the brain in ways that are just beginning to be understood in the neurobiological research. So I'm going to show you a few pictures of the way that some adolescents that I've worked with kind of use the meditation process of repetitive image making as a way of self-soothing. She actually didn't quite finish and was able to talk with me after she had made this. It was as if the process of the repetitive circular drawings allowed her to enter into a very different space. And then the last one I'm going to show you in this is the way, this is really interesting. It's two collage pictures, both of which are cornered, right? You see this is a tiger in its corner, and this is a person with his hands over their face. And what she did with this one was repeated the patterning of the tile that had been, you see there's sort of tiles in the original collage picture? She extended the tiles just the way that a girl previously had extended the bricks. So there's this process, which I believe is really linked to neurological processes of patterning and repeating, perseverating perhaps, that allows for changes to happen in the brain that potentially has psychotherapeutic consequences. Whoops. Okay. And the last one I'm going to talk about is resiliency. And I'll go back to resiliency. The whole notion is to access strengths and to show that the art process itself is empowering. I do a lot of work down at Juvenile Hall. Actually, Juvenile Hall's right. We go to a place right here around the corner. I bring my students and we work with them. And the art's been amazing. These kids are so bored and so locked into regimen that this is like opening a tiny little valve. And I'll just read you what this girl wrote. It all started when I was 8 years old, seeing my mother on drugs and the police taking her away. Ever since then, I've been struggling with my depression. Can you read it?
No.
Okay. It's yellow, so it's hard to, she changes color. As I grew older, I struggled to cut. I started to cut and do drugs to release my pain, but now that I'm in jail and older, I learned from my mistakes. I make my pain into strength. I know I will become the journalist I want to become and be a happy girl who threw all her pain, it's interesting she spells through, who threw all her pain away into the ocean. Really powerful work with these kids. Okay, so there's our history. That's my understanding of the way the trends in mental health have sort of informed how we think about using the art in psychotherapy. What I do now is I've become very interested in engaging in my own spiritual practices, and these are the three images up now are the first book I wrote, Panim El Panim, and the second, the Midrashic Mirrors. That's some work that I do. I do Hebrew calligraphy, and I take sacred text and render it in the Hebrew calligraphy and then embellish it with color. And I've been into dyeing cheesecloth and using the cheesecloth, which is itself a medium of revelation, because if you spread the cheesecloth, it reveals. If you clump the cheesecloth, it occludes, right? So that's just a little bit of my own artwork. I'm going to show you, actually I think I'm going to pass through this, but this is from my book, Midrashic Mirrors, and it's written by a woman who's a psychoanalyst, actually. I didn't bring it. And it's showing her artwork from Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and it gives the narrative of her experience. And I'm showing you this all now. I realize it has a lot less to do with art therapy, or maybe it has everything to do with art therapy, to show you how much more holistic I've become as I've moved out of and got some distance from the rigidity of the clinical theories and understand that those ways in which we pigeonhole ourselves when we come up with psychological theories sometimes miss the big picture. So what am I doing now? I'm really interested in interfaith imagery, and I have some flyers for a project. It's called Reimaging the Legacies of Abraham. And I'm doing this with Muslim, Christian, and Jewish women, where we're going to study the stories of Abraham through image making. If any of you are interested, I'm welcoming 10 Muslim, 10 Christian, and 10 Jewish women, and there's still a little bit of space. It's at the Pico Union Project, which is sort of, you know what Pico Union Project is? It's in the sort of shadow of Staples Center. Yeah. So you're welcome to take one of these flyers. It is just for women though.
Can you touch on Leviticus at all?
I do, yes, but not in this project. Abraham is the story that has roots for Christianity, Muslims, Islam, and Judaism. So I'm using that for now. I'm just starting this. I'm also doing some work at Children's Hospital, and I'm working in particular with the children, the families of the children who've been in the PICU, the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, and we're looking at art exercises with those families that help with the attachment that can be so ruptured by the medical emergency. So I'm actually looking for partners in that project, and that's how I contacted Donna Mance, who brought me here today, because I'm looking for partners that are interested in that kind of research, looking at attachment theory in particular, and the ruptures that happen in a medical emergency in a family, and the creative process as a response to a healing response to that rupture. Okay, that's my presentation. I know we have both Payne and Lynn who want to say something, but I'm interested in your responses and your questions. Questions or thoughts, Toby?
Thoughts, a couple of thoughts. First, thank you for the work that you do. It's really phenomenal. And as a health psychologist, I work with a lot of kids with diabetes. And so I just wanted to say that the most impactful thing I've ever done is have them draw what diabetes means. And, you know, they have syringes that are bigger than their bodies.
Yeah.
And when I show that to the doctors, it really helps. So it's not just for the patient, but I think for the medical community, I use it as a way to talk about this is really what's going on in their experience. And then we send them to diabetes camp, and after, the syringes become little tiny, little manageable things. And you know, it's just really amazing.
So that's really beautiful. And the problem with that is we don't have enough research in our field to really use the changes in the artwork as a marker of something in substance. It's really hard to connect to the evidence-based practices and the need for evidence in order to get more funding for these kinds of projects. Right, I'm sure you know that already. Mark.
Well, just to feed off of that, and what my question was seeing what you did with the trauma.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about the trauma, illness, and disease.
Yeah.
So this was my question before Toby's comment. But I'm imagining, like, for collaborations, we have a big group, for instance, here that's big on narrative medicine and qualitative research. So a project like that, or like the trauma or whatever you're doing at Children's Hospital, to have, you know, some sort of, you know, interview, quality, you know, that sort of evidence-based would seem to me to make sense for this kind of work.
Well, that's why I'm here, actually. I'm looking for partners because at LMU, we're not a research institute. I don't have to bring in any money. I have a tenure track position that I can just sort of sit on as long as I want to. And it doesn't, but I'm looking to find partners who,
Thank you.
I'm looking to find partners who can help maybe get some funding and establish a stronger basis for the research. And I look to you at USC as some real, and UCLA, as some real possibilities there. So one of the projects I started, and actually I started it last night, and it's not in this presentation, is at LMU we have something called the Impact Study. You can look at it, IMPAACT. It's being run by the Health Sciences Department, the Life Sciences Department. They're looking at women who are in recovery from uterine cancer. And they're doing targeted exercise to address the decrease in bone density from the treatments for uterine cancer. They have 100 women. And what we're doing, in addition to their very quantitative research, is doing a little qualitative pilot study within that, where we're taking 11 of these women and taking them through an altered book-making process, where they're taking a book and they're altering it to become their cancer story. And the idea is that their story is so empowering, it's so redundant for them. The cancer, the story of being a cancer survivor, and we're externalizing it and helping them in a creative process to retell the story in a way that can be shared, meanings can be searched in it, and most importantly, they can take it home and sort of extend it into their family system. And we just started this last night, and actually I'm kind of blown away by the response of, we had 11 women there last night, by the response of these women to the power of a creative process as part of their healing. They came there to LMU for exercise. And this is just really grabbing their attention. So I'm looking for partners in that too. I'm 62 years old. I've been doing this for a long time, and I want to start to formalize it with the kind of research that it isn't in our field yet. That's what I want to do next. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Other thoughts? Did anybody? It is 9 o'clock.
Could you put your email back up?
Sure. Well, I don't know. Scroll up. That was there. Okay? You can see it.
You gotta go on, you gotta.
That's your
read the
website.
slideshow, yeah.
Yeah? No, that's our program. That's not even my.
I think I just know yours.
There it is.
There it is.
So really what I'd love to hear is if anybody, and I know I'm over time, I'd love to hear anybody has any thoughts about the art that you made and link it to the presentation. If anybody see anything in their own experiential exercise that has a connection to any of the theoretical ideas. Yeah.
Well, could I just do what I was going to say right now and for like one? The Institute for Genetic Medicine Art Gallery that we're in right now, its mission is to be an incubator of social capital, which is that we bring people together, especially UCLA and our other collaborators. And this is the artwork that I made, not knowing that it was going to not only be for here, but for what I'm going to say at the Rotary in San Marino at lunchtime today. Everybody's looking for the key to get in. And it's a spiral of many steps that are integrated in a pattern that everything we've just seen has done. And you are now in an atmosphere of an exhibition called Subconscious Communication, Biological Instinct. And the artwork that you see out there is done by Nikki Anand, who flew here from India to show how global the spiritual, global heritage, psychological elements that Debra has just shown us are truly universal. And this image, which at first appears to be quite chaotic, if you look carefully, you'll see one humanity, one face coming out of it. And if you look really carefully, as my 12-year-old granddaughter did, who's dyslexic and an artist, you see another face here and another face here. That artwork is out there on that wall. This is all the light we do not see. And it is us, artists and humanists, 100 years behind the molecular scientists who have created a process that we can follow, and it gets them NIH grants. And human behavior, I believe, works in the same patterns as molecular behavior. And we use the patterns, we can jump ahead of where we are faster, thanks to the molecular scientists who preceded us.
Wonderful. Okay, and maybe Ping, you want to say
Okay,
something?
so I'll just tie it into my comment about the card. I chose words, you have choices. And what we do is, owing to the huge needs in humanity, we actually train people to develop and deliver socially, emotionally supportive arts experiences without crossing over the boundary of therapy, which is identifying and treating a problem, right? And we have found that we can do it. We use some of the stellar faculty from the LMU Art Therapy team to teach people. And what we're finding is that it's opening up possibilities for integrative medicine because these practices can be delivered in schools, in health settings, recreational settings. And we just find within the space of an hour, a room full of strangers can become each other's closest confidants. Very, very, very powerful work.
Right.
And it needs to be utilized.
Right, thank you, Ping, that's great. Okay. So take your card home and ponder it. Does it have, what does it share with you and what windows does it open? Thank you.
So Debra, thank you so much. It was so exciting, and the possibilities for creating some good research projects and evidence base for this field and its role in healing.
Yeah. This is the right place to be having that conversation.
Yes, this is the right place to have that conversation of why we do this. So I did want to take this opportunity, also following Debra's presentation, this whole topic of art and healing and art and medicine and the roles. So Lynn already, I think you said, Lynn, I was going to ask Lynn to speak for a couple minutes about the IGM and what they're doing, and she just did this. And I want to introduce Ping Ho, who's here from UCLA. Ping, I don't know if that was your piece or you want to say a little bit more about UCLA. But Ping is the founding director of the UCLA Arts and Healing Initiative. I just recently became aware of Ping and invited her down here to say a few words about UCLA. So we get the UCLA Crosstown and LMU, and we have quite an axis there of strength and art and healing, and I think we should take advantage of these possibilities for collaboration. So did you want to say anything more, or that was it? Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much, and thank you all for coming. This was a beautiful, beautiful
Anybody's
morning
interested
presentation.
in this Legacies of Abraham, I'd love to.
Yes.
I think Toby is.
So stay tuned for future announcements of other breakfast symposia. Past years we had it monthly. This year we're slowing it down, probably quarterly, maybe every 2 months. It depends how we go, but we'll keep sending those announcements. And what's beautiful about these mornings is getting people from all across town, people who are at these academic centers, and people from the community who come down. So it's good to see you all again, Kenny and Audrey and all you folks who came today. It's good to see you all, because I feel like with the IIH here, and it feels like we're on the threshold of really some really big movement and collaborative work. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time.